Thank you for coming to this presentation. My name is Rahmat Shah. I would like to present this study about diagnosis of teacher assessment literacy in Package C non-formal education. The first author for this study is Mr. Dadi Darmawan from Jakarta State University, and second author is Rahmat Shah from Staben Sriwijaya, and the third author, Mr. Adi Irfansyah from Jakarta State University. Introduction. Assessment literacy refers to the tutor knowledge and skill in carrying out assessment activities. We have a three segmentation for a tutor developed to skill in assessment or teaching management. The first to knowledge. The tutor as a leader in a class must have leadership and must have knowledge of assessment. And the second skill, the ability of tutor in classroom can be built through the experience and formal education of educator. And the third, practice. Assessment is an ability that needs to be practiced so that learning develops. The revise in 2017 explained that assessment is used by educators and school is to determine the learning success of students, not only used in non-formal education, but assessment is also used in non-formal education, such as the Community Learning Center or PKBM. In non-formal education, the tutor as an educator at PKBM is the person who is responsibility for improving student learning achievement in class. The level mastery of the tutor competencies is very influent in learning. One of the competence refers to is the tutor ability in learning management, including assessment management, and to become a competent tutor in terms of assessment require a good academic background and adequate technical experience. Tutor background influence classroom learning and assessment, and tutor play an integral role evaluating a student therefore their competence and knowledge. In classroom assessment practice need to be developed. The competence of tutor in exploring assessment as a series of characteristics, knowledge, skill, and attitude of tutor is needed to improve the performance of effective tutors in education context. Tutors understand practical assessment skill in a classroom, which reflect their perfection of their skill in carrying out classroom assessment practice. In addition, tutor can assess their assessment skill so that if they can bring the assessment practice to the maximum. When asked about their classroom practice assessment, tutor generally indicated that they were less adapted at developing evaluation and assessment system. Hereinafter literature review. The tutor capability assessment, which consists of planning, implementation, and reporting, is still not good because it is based on factually observation. Leonard stated the quality of tutor in Indonesia is still below the standard. In 2015, the result of the tutor competency tests were still below the minimum competence standard. At the time, the average score was 53 or 2 points below. In the term of learning and assessment methods, most tutors in Indonesia have not been able to adapt to the times. Most of the tutors are limited to teaching. This method is the old method because in the past tutors were the only source to knowledge from the UKG test. Only 6% of tutors can register for assessment well. According to Tyler, in 2013, an education has 4 integrated components, namely educational goal, organization or content of learning material, the learning process and assessment of outcome. Assessment is an action to determine of extent to which educational goal can be achieved by student in the form of learning outcome that they show at the end of educational activities. According to Warrington in 1652, the purpose of education is to describe the change in abilities and behavior desired by students. From this, the assessment process is an important component in knowing the extent to which changes in ability and behavior desired by student. The follow-up of the assessment according to Clauser and Humble as material for further guidance to student and providing information to outsider related to student learning outcomes. Educators' strategies have assessment. The first strategy is a rubric assessment, and the second, performance appraisal for the describe about the characteristic of a student, like a behavior or attitude, and portfolio assessment for describe about the skill of student for adapting in environment. Self-assessment for rewinds in manage in you can assess your body or yourself, and peer assessment for knowing environment and your friends, and written test assessment for the describe about your knowledge. Assessment standard are criteria regarding the scope, objective, benefit, principle, mechanism, procedure, and result of the learning outcome assessment instrument used as the basis for assessing the learning outcomes of students in primary and higher education. After that, methods. The methods, we use the quantitative and qualitative approach. This research use qualitative and qualitative approach with a survey. The conceptual frameworks of this paper is built of a 6 model, which describe the main component of assessment literacy, and the data collection. We try to technique use purposive sampling with the aim of tutor who have taught at the PKBM for 10 years. The population in this study were PKBM tutor in Jakarta C, namely 100 teacher. Qualitative data analysis. From the stage of qualitative data analysis are data collection, reduction, display, and conclusion. The analysis process starts from the data recap, data reduction, including data simplification by sorting out the data needed. And quantitative data, the data analysis was conducted using a statistic described. There is a segmentation method for this study. The first teacher conception, domain cognitive and affective dimension of belief system regarding L2 writing assessment, and teacher prior experience of assessment learner, value judgment of assessment, and the practice domain, the what and how aspect of classroom-based assessment practice in writing. Attempt to assessment in innovation and their implementation strategies. And the value of this frame is a teacher assessment literacy. And assessment literacy has a knowledge base, writing assessment knowledge and knowledge of feedback. There is a probably mediated by a contextual factors, and the probably mediated by contextual factor. And then result and discussion. Results and discussion. An observation sheet is prepared for each type of assessment following. An observation sheet is prepared for each type of assessment, following the characteristic of each but based on general blueprint. Observations were made on tutor planning, assessment design in syllabus and lesson plan, execution, assessment carried out during and after teaching and learning process, and analysis and reporting. Below is the blueprint for the project assessment implementation. An overview of information regarding the ability of tutor in developing skill assessment instrument was collected using the skill test validation instrument presented in the table. The questionnaire data contains 7 assessment literacy indicators, consists of 30 statements and 100 tutor. Respondent with a scale 1 until 4. The lowest score 1 x5 equally 5, and the higher score is a 20. Data from indicator discrepancy can be seen in the table. The characteristic is but based on the general blueprint. Observations were made on the tutor planning. We can see the selection of assessment method and development of value method and management and interpretation of assessment result. The results of the assessment are used as curriculum policies, valid student assessment procedure, submitting of research of assessment to parents, exploring method, and use of appraisal information. And hereafter, selection of assessment method. Information regarding selection of the tutor method in developing skill assessment in instrument was collected using the skill test validation instrument presented in the picture or the figure. The data on the results of assessment of partners' abilities in developing skill assessment instrument are presented in figure. Assessment can describe techniques and problems that educators should consider when they design use assessment. Assessment characteristics affect that is learned and the level of meaningful involvement of student in learning process. And the next, capability assessment grade. The research of described statistics show that average competence of tutor in increasing 53.25 of tutor more more or less 5 years in 61 in the range 60 until 10 and 6 4 5 5 56 in more than 10 years. That means the tendency for higher assessment competence is between 6 until 10 and very higher, more than 10 years. Long teaching experience show the tutor teaching tendency score to be higher. Darling Harmon emphasizes that the tutor's experience in teaching can affect the tutor experience in controlling learning activities in each class. The tutor quality indicator makes a statistically significant distribution to student outcomes, but over time, the quality decreases over time. In conclusion, this study has explored extent of PKBM teacher knowledge, conception, and practice in the context which they are written. In general, tutor participants felt that they had basic knowledge of non-formal education. The study has explored the extent, and their concept of the written table was mostly positive. The assumption that writing can help improve writing skill. The teacher participant also tried to provide institution. In the valid student procedure, respondent have a sufficient knowledge about two aspects writing assessment theory, namely fairness and base assessment. Even so, respondent has that have minimal knowledge, the theory of validation and reliability, and the test construction. During the interview, 4 tutors stated that they had only vague understanding of what reliability and validity mean, and able that these theories may not be directly related to be use of consistent in assessing. Thank you very much for listening me, and may all those we have shared be beneficial for us. Thank you so much for attention.